good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you log in to the next episode of Unnati. I have today a crusader uh, for the rights of LGBTQ community and a resilient woman who has been at the forefront of, of ensuring equality and inclusion for all. She comes with an extensive experience in the space of equality and inclusion and has been at the forefront for the rights of the transgender and the LGBT community. It's such an honor and pleasure, ma'am, to host you today. Zainab, ma'am, uh, very grateful from the side of NABET and from my differently abled communities and all my viewers of my podcast for consenting to be a part of the podcast today. Zainab, ma'am, thank you. And for the audience, if you could just help us with a small introduction, Zanab ma'am. I know it's a very extensive one, but I still would be grateful if you could take it from here.
So thank you, Arjun. I would really be preferred to be called Zainab, and that's how all my friends, well-wishers, colleagues, and collaborators know me by name. I find the mention of ma'am slightly offsetting and make me sound so old. So I'm Zainab for all of you, and Namaskar. Hi. Uh, as very kindly introduced by Arjun, I happen to be one of the people. I don't call myself a crusader, I just call myself a community worker who has been for the last 2.5 decades working on LGBTIQ, gender, human rights, and health, and overall development of various marginalized communities. I have the good fortune of working with very small community based organizations across India. I think it was my foundation years of working with these NGOs that taught me to value inclusion at the most important layer, the
Okay.
absolute threadbare community, who are so disenfranchised, who don't even have the ability to speak their voice, and often they don't even if they are able to speak voices, don't have adequate platforms to address their grievances. So my foundation years have been with community based organizations. From there, I graduated to started working with larger NGOs, development partners, and then a substantial portion of my life, about 12 years, went with working with the United Nations Development Program, a UN program in India. Also, for about 5 years out of this, I happened to work in the region, in the ASPAC region, as a policy analyst on human rights, where part of my work was on working with various member states on the UN human rights monitoring mechanisms and access to justice. From there, I took a totally different U turn. I came back to India and I left development policy and left the world of say working with communities affected directly to go
Mm-hmm.
on to work in a corporate, something that I had never envisaged myself doing in all
Okay.
of those years. I did brief stints in working with corporates, but most of them have been with call centers and stuff like that just to pay my fees, but never envisaged myself taking up a full-time corporate role.
Right.
And then came this wonderful opportunity of working on inclusion and diversity in various organizations.
Great.
One of the foremost being KPMG India and KPMG Global Services in India. And then, of course, my current role as the Chief of Inclusion, Diversity, Culture and Wellness at Pernod Ricard India. So for me, it's been quite a journey, and I have worn different hats, that of an NGO worker, that of a marginalized community, that of a person from the trans community, to being a policy maker, policy enabler, a
Mm-hmm.
policy catalyst in my current role with the private sector. And now the latest hat that I'm wearing is also that of a social entrepreneur. I run two very
Yes.
interesting social
The most important
entrepreneurship
part.
ideas on working with the trans community and the non-binary community. I run a small cafe which
Yes, ma'am.
is not only employs trans people, it is owned, managed, and run by trans community. This started incidentally exactly a year ago on the 9th of
Mm-hmm.
October. So we completed 1 year today. And
Great.
earlier this year in April, we launched another wonderful
Wow.
initiative, a salon supported by Deutsche Bank and Rotary, The previous initiative also was supported by Rotary, but also had an individual contribution. So here I am today trying to see which hats I'm going to juggle, but here is a package in front of you.
Awesome, Zanab, and do pardon me if I, just it's stuck on my lips. I keep coming back with ma'am regularly, so it's just by habit. So please give me that if that happens, please do excuse me. And in that whole introduction, Zanab, I think the best part was the cafe which you have started and the now upcoming salon, because when it comes to opportunities for employment and when it comes to starting small enterprise and social entrepreneurial ventures, I believe that they hold the maximum impact because there a person's passion comes in as the eligibility, not their education or any other impediment for them getting an opportunity. And I think that's where, uh, in spite, of course, I'm a big fan of your work, and there is a long introduction, but that part was the best part, which resonated with me. Uh, Continuing from there, Zainab, on the on your journey, of course, you've spoken about how you've been working across from starting with your own enterprise and then from KPMG and then as presently the diversity and inclusion head of uh, Pernod Ricard. Can you help us with the inspiration for this journey? What was that it factor which inspired you most and which led you to your present destination? If you can help us with that.
That's a very interesting question. I must say that most of my journey has come out of necessity. So they
Okay.
say that necessity is the mother of all innovations, and I think I'm not a stranger to this fact that when I moved out of house at a very young age, without support, uh, with absolutely nothing to do, people encouraged me to continue my education.
Hmm.
Um, for a young rebel of a person, I was, when you are in your teens, you are rebellious by nature. You want to challenge the status quo. You want to do so many things which is just don't fit in the box. Uh, Someone encouraged me to continue my education. I think
Okay.
partly it was due to my parents' efforts, but also partly due to my community, who said that
Hmm.
there is going to be a future. We just don't know when.
Hmm.
And if I were to look at my own professional journey, which started 23 years ago, 23 years ago, I really did not know where my journey would take me. So, from that very small NGO, starting at a salary of 2,750, doing outreach work on HIV, health prevention, distribution of condoms to drug drivers, to
Right.
sex workers, to where I am today, taking home a seven-figure salary. I think the inspiration um, is of course divine. At some point of time, there was divine intervention helping
True.
me, but most importantly, I think my own need to prove myself. There is
Hmm.
always this talk about women who face the glass ceiling. But at least
Right.
in certain cases, you can see what is beyond the glass ceiling.
Hmm.
For trans people, and of course, many more marginalized communities like me, I'm not saying
Hmm.
trans people are the only marginalized communities. There are
True.
perhaps much worse communities who are on the borders of intersectionality, dealing with a much more difficult existential crisis.
Right.
For them, it is a concrete ceiling because you don't have role
Hmm.
models. And even if
Hmm.
role models exist in that space, more often than not, they are so distant to make a
Yeah.
point comparison to see that is very difficult. So
Hmm.
each one of us, and I, whenever someone tells me that I'm a role model, and I just join my hands and said, no, I'm so sorry, I'm not a role model. What all I have done from the selfish motive of bettering myself and my community. So there
Hmm.
has been a selfish motive behind, and that is empowering yourself to become a conduit for the community.
Makes sense. Hmm.
During this journey, I think there are numerous people in my life who encourage me to do better, to not remain with the mundane. There is no problem in being with the mundane. There are people who do regular jobs and they are very happy with that. There is nothing wrong. But often people will tell you, aim for the stars. It will be
Right.
difficult, and I have been blessed with people in my life who not only told me aim for the stars, they also provided me with this, with the tools, with the platforms, with the
Hmm.
growth opportunities, and most importantly, the belief that I could be better than what I am.
Right. Right.
So that has been my inspiration. And of course, me being from the trans community, it's also the hate that has been constantly thrown at
Hmm.
us, which has also
Hmm.
acted as an enabler. But should
Right.
I choose for hate
Hmm.
to be used against me only
Hmm.
as a enabler, I would never choose that because it is painful.
Hmm.
There are
Hmm.
uh, there are many things that you deal with. There are scars that you carry for life, and
Hmm.
although I say that thank you for all the haters, it's because of them I am here. I wish I did not have to go through, and so do so many millions of people like me who've had similar stories to go
Right.
through what they have to come to where they are today.
Hmm. No, I absolutely resonate that thought, ma'am, because when it comes to access to opportunity, deny a person post giving him a chance. If that is not given, then I think uh, that bluntly is unjustified. Let a person fail at least, give him that opportunity, and then deny or accept the person for what he is or she is. But what about those who are not given a chance for the first place? And ma'am, specifically in Pernod Ricard, I'm aware of the huge commitment it has to diversity and inclusion. Some of the key initiatives that you have started or your team has started towards ensuring a more equality for all, especially the transgender and the LGBT community. If you could speak about that in your present role and in your organization, if possible.
So I must thank an organization like Pernod Ricard, who truly is inclusive in the larger sense. And if you see, the Pernod Ricard philosophy is about conviviality. It's a French word which basically means different things for different people, but basically being open to being friends, to making new people, to passing on a great environment around you. So I think I am so privileged to be part of a multinational organization which in so many ways did the unthinkable. Like before I came in, Pernod Ricard did what it did
Hmm.
in terms of LGBT
Right.
sensitization. They had already started work on
Hmm.
that. They had talks on this. They had looked at
Hmm.
partnering, say, with your
Hmm.
organization, which looks at
Right.
employment of persons with disability. And of course, I've seen so many
Hmm.
trans men working through you for various Pernod Ricard functions in the audit space.
Right.
And like
Right.
for me, I mean, I was very pleasantly surprised that, oh my God,
Hmm.
I felt happy uh,
Ji.
in that sense, even if it was a third party engagement. The
Right.
second thing was that when they hired me, they sent a very clear message that we
Hmm.
believe in truly investing in the cases of our community.
Okay.
We have an equal opportunity policy. We have
Hmm.
gender affirming care, which is covered through insurance. We have partner benefits, which includes partners of any gender. I'm not going to say same sex because, irrespective
Hmm.
of which gender your partner is, whether you
Right.
are in a live-in relationship or it's a married relationship, there is coverage. There is coverage for
Hmm.
their parents as well. So I think
Okay.
for me, it's a matter of pride saying that sometimes we come from such terrible backgrounds economically
Hmm.
that this is a glimmer
Hmm.
of hope.
Hmm.
So, from introducing that to having an equal opportunity policy, having people
Hmm.
from the LGBTI community recruited, um, running gamification challenge on allyship, running various
Hmm.
initiatives. Now we are initiating our self ID campaign to leaving a footprint in the CSR space. See,
Hmm.
while it was not fashionable to support trans people to the CSR space, Pernod Ricard
Ji.
at least has made that inroad where
Hmm.
the first thing was, looking at association through art. So when they worked with the
Right.
Aravani art project to create a mural of that sort, art mural.
Hmm.
Then,
Hmm.
when we worked on the first phase of the transformation fellows, where we got a whole big
Hmm.
batch of trans people and non-binary persons from
Okay.
across
Hmm.
India through a fully paid 1 year fellowship, which had a
Right.
6 monthly academic portion and a 6 monthly fully paid internship at by
Mm.
Pernod at various
Yeah.
organizations, I think it already
Yeah.
set the bar high. Today, we are in the second edition of the Transformative
Mm.
Fellowship, which is a diploma program, which has changed the nature of the program, but it still invests in the community. There is this program partnership with Connecting Dreams Foundation and with other NGO partners. I think this is fantastic. And then look at it from the brand communication. One of our
Mm.
well-known
Mm.
brands, Absolute, came out with a
Mm.
fantastic campaign during Pride Month on being an absolute
Okay.
ally, where we used our
Mm.
mainstream channel communication, social media influencers to talk
Mm.
about their experiences. What is
Mm.
inclusive language? What about them? How do you work with communities? And also our brands and markets team, which has done work in certain pockets with the LGBT community. So I think we have done such an expanse of work through event
Mm.
curation, working with bartenders, working with different vendors on LGBT issues. I think to having people in our offices on various festivities, although it's a small token of inclusion, it is part of the whole expanse of work that we do. So for me, it is very interesting when I see people and the organization delivering so much more. I feel a lot of pride in Pernod Ricard.
Recognized as a community leader, and you've been speaking on the issues of the inclusion for the LGBT community, and given the immense work that you have done in this space, you've also been fortunate, or rather the community has been fortunate to have you um, as a leader who has also been quite active in the private sector. That said, there is lots more which needs to be done in the space of inclusion uh, for all. Uh, and what are your thoughts on how can the private sector better contribute to bring about a change for the better for the community?
I think, Arjun, one is we need more collaborations like the way Pernod Ricard has with NABET. We need
Okay.
people to encourage an entire spectrum of people working through you to come and
Mhm.
experience what corporate culture is, but also for corporate
Right.
culture to understand how difficult, easy the challenges of working with extremely marginalized communities.
Correct.
Till
Mm.
such time that organizations are capacitated enough to have them on their own roles or there is a provision
Mm.
made. Number one.
Mm.
Second is a very interesting topic, and it's a very controversial topic in the sense that how
Right.
does one do talent attraction? How does one
Mm.
create a talent pipeline? So a lot of time people say, "Oh, we don't mind hiring LGBT people. We don't mind
Mm.
doing this. We don't mind doing. We have a policy, but we are not able to source the right kind of talent."
Right.
And I believe
Mm.
my community is very talented.
Okay.
It's just that sometimes the investment required to make them job ready for a particular environment is not there. See,
Mm.
the meritorious lot
Mm.
is anyways
Mm.
going to get jobs on merit. What
Correct.
we need to ensure is that they get into the right organizations which truly value them through
Mm.
inclusive policies, etc., so on and so forth. The second one is those between the meritorious lot and those that are absolutely unskilled for a corporate job. How do you groom them? How do you make them jobs ready through skilling, through
Mm.
entrepreneurship,
Mm.
internship? I'm sorry. Um,
Mm.
how do you skill them to an extent that they become job ready? The
Mm.
third part is, of course, investing back into the communities in terms
Mm.
of, like, for example, the way corporates, the way philanthropic organizations, high net individuals, government have invested in science, technology, engineering, medicine
Mm.
for women and
Mm.
girls. We need to
Mm.
also see systemic educational affirmation for the
Mm.
LGBTI, especially the trans community. When
Mm.
we do that over the next 5 years, 10 years, that time we'll be able to talk about somewhere start the discussion around meritocracy in hiring
Mm.
communities. Because
Right.
that investment currently is totally lacking. Or even if it's
Mm.
happening, it's happening in very small bits and pieces.
Mm.
The second
Mm.
thing is that having affirmative practices in your hiring. but not limiting it to an internal looking. How are your brands? How are your products? How are your services
Hmm.
geared to be inclusive? Are you using the right language? Are your products sending the right messages? Is the
Hmm.
advertising around them? Is the visual
Hmm.
representation around also doing their job?
Hmm.
Lastly, are you willing to put your money where there is
Exactly.
really need?
Hmm.
And would you be now interested in taking up your
Hmm.
CSR footprint to a community that really needs help in skilling,
Hmm.
rights
Hmm.
based work, in basically competency development? See, this is a
Hmm.
huge unharnessed community. We can
Correct.
either make the investments to make them more productive, or we
Hmm.
keep on saying there is this big gap between what we want and what we have. That gap will
Correct.
always continue unless investments
Hmm.
are made. So invest, attract the right talent through right set of initiatives, build the
Hmm.
talent pipeline internally and through supportive organizations such as yours. The
Hmm.
last but most important part is that continue to engage in IDNE, because every
Hmm.
rupee that you invest in inclusion, diversity, and equity will give you
Hmm.
huge dividends, much more
Hmm.
than your branding and marketing budgets. Every dollar, every rupee that you invest is giving
Hmm.
you the kind of branding, the kind of visibility that perhaps
Hmm.
some of the existing product brandings, also a service brand, may not get at that point of time. So I'm saying there is
Correct.
this huge
Correct.
potential to grow.
I'm very humbly, but I'm too insignificant in terms of your experience. But 2 cents from my side to what I see as a potential problem. The first problem which corporates complain about is, uh, and I speak for both stakeholders. I speak for the community representatives, and I speak for the corporates because I interact through my work on both of their ends. First, when it comes to a problem, when it comes to inclusion, they complain about the huge attrition. That is, if a person has joined the organization, uh, he or she, or whatever be the person, he or she or they leave the organization soon, and because of that, the investment which has gone in building that talent has not been recovered, and that then creates a problem. The other side is that when I speak to the representatives, what they tell me is that uh, the the sensitization which is required for all employees who they interact with, because of course the leadership can be on board with the idea, but it's not the leadership which has a day-to-day interaction with this particular person. And when this person faces any kind of a situation which is untoward, the reaction is then called out as a problem with the whole hiring, and that impedes the potential number of people who could be hired. So it's like a situation which is wrong on both sides, right? If you speak for the representative, they're right in making their complaints heard or their voice heard, and the other side, corporates have a equally right reason in saying that eventually it's a business which we run, and we have to ensure in the long run that value has to be driven. I understand it's a very difficult situation, but just what do you think on how can this be attended to?
So very interestingly, my take is slightly different on this one.
Okay.
If an organization is making an investment in getting people on board, they should invest to make sure that they are retained. Why do
Hmm.
people leave organizations within a year of joining? Either they are
Hmm.
disgruntled with the organization, either they feel unsafe, either there is
Hmm.
an experience, unwanted experience of stigma, or they are not able to fit within the environment. In either
Hmm.
case, how can the burden of
Hmm.
attrition
Hmm. Hmm.
be
Hmm.
split 50-50 between the person joining in and the person recruiting? There has to be a larger share,
Hmm.
because the person who's coming in is not
Hmm.
coming in
Hmm.
with vested power in the organization. It's a new person
Hmm.
trying to
Hmm.
find their way to a labyrinth of an organization,
Correct.
perhaps with no corporate exposure prior. I'm saying those with corporate
Hmm.
exposure might find it slightly easier
Easy.
to slide in, at least they
Easier.
know what to do.
Hmm.
So is your
mm,
buddy system working? Is your HR
mm,
periodic check working? Is your
mm,
IDE manager making sure that they are talking to people across, but also talking to people who are coming into
mm,
specific hiring drives and who's a
mm,
diversity
mm,
candidate? Is your
mm,
hiring manager and the hiring team
mm,
being sensitized towards
mm, mm,
it?
mm,
Now, listing all of these steps, I'm sure
mm.
an organization, a right minded organization, is doing all of this.
Correct.
There will
Correct.
still be attrition
There will
because
still
it's
be
a
attrition.
natural phenomena that
Mm,
people who are disgruntled with the organization will leave in the first 6 months to 1 year.
बिल्कुल.
So one
Mm,
has to also see a percentile value calculation between, say, if there are only two people in the company and one leaves, you can't say "Arey,
mm,
50% of that has gone out." One has to also
बिल्कुल.
see how much of the statistic value, like for example, if there are
Mm,
500 persons working
mm,
and you
mm,
recruit 50 people in the first in this
mm,
batch, out of that
mm,
the cisgender heterosexual people, maybe there's an attrition of say 18%. I'm just saying one has
mm,
to cumulative also understanding about how both communities are and what has been their
mm,
stories around it. So my
mm,
personal belief is that the person may perhaps only lose a job opportunity, but you are see that what does the organization lose? It's
mm,
lost the time invested in sourcing out that
mm,
candidate.
mm,
It's lost
mm,
the cost involved with it. It has
mm,
invested resources from an IDE perspective in creating a diversity pipeline. And when these diversity hires fail, then there is
mm.
resistance built in by
Of
hiring
course.
managers to not have that
Mm,
pipeline. So the
mm.
stakes are more higher for the organization than I would say for the community.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And it takes a lot more effort to find a right candidate from the community versus, finding. So that has to be factored in when we talk about So yeah, that has to be factored, man, and rightly so. Um, in your view, what is the most significant challenge that corporates are in today's days facing in their diversity and inclusion, and what else can be done in order to add greater impetus
I think
to potential DNI hiring across
what I
organizations?
just answered, actually, those are the
Hmm.
only things that you need to keep in place.
Okay.
When one is
Hmm.
able to
Hmm.
reach a specific maturity in doing those steps, like
Right.
is your TA person sensitized? Are you constantly making
Hmm.
sure that the retraining being provided to your recruiters is enabling the processes, say for persons with disability, for LGBT community? Are they asking the right set of questions? Are they looking at the talent map? See, sometimes you may give a resume of a person with disability and say, okay, find a
Hmm.
fitment for that. And the CV has nothing to communicate. How does one look then objectively at a CV if there is no prior experience in that role? And your own
Hmm.
organization, Nabet, has sometimes brought people with absolutely no background to a very
Hmm.
specialized training, and you've done job hand holding, etc. So unless things like these
Right.
reach a particular maturity curve, then you can say, okay, this has been done with this has we have done it, we have learned our lessons. Now tell me, Zainab,
Hmm.
what more needs to be done?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Because clearly we are not doing
So,
enough or reach the point of maturity in what we are doing to say that, okay, we've done everything. Now tell me, what is the next step to get more diverse? Are we saying that
so
all our hiring managers have sold into the idea of sourcing diverse talent? Are we looking beyond tier
hmm.
1 cities and A-list universities? Are we looking at
Hmm.
those kind of people whose skill set is not 100%, but we make an
Hmm.
affirmative choice in that
Hmm.
candidate? Are we working with the documentation of the persons? And you would know from your experiences, these are
Hmm.
such practical difficulties,
Hmm.
especially
Hmm.
when you get unskilled persons or people
Hmm.
without prior corporate exposure to start learning skill and learn. There are more and more difficulties because there will be
Hmm.
problems with etiquette, there will be problems with fitting into
Hmm.
corporate
Hmm.
culture, with time accounting. But these are investments in a community. Any margin, if these gaps were not there, they wouldn't need us to intervene.
Exactly. Exactly.
They would be
Exactly. And
as capable as anyone else, or as
hmm.
capable as others who already have jobs. It's the lack of those or the paucity of those that has actually made them vulnerable. And so the
Hmm.
investment cannot be seen that, okay, one batch done, I'm done with this. There is a need for us to constantly reinvent what you are
Hmm.
doing to the point. Okay, we've done it with A, B, C, D groups. We've done it for 2 years now, 3 years now. We've got our learnings. Let me now look at a new model. Then I say, okay, let us then start looking at what is it specifically that we can do.
Hmm. Another thing, ma'am, when it comes to NABET story, and I can say this, we only look for intent. Uh, to be honest, if you try to match it with the eligibilities which companies come with, it will be an impossible journey because many will be rejected at the resume itself. And that is the hard fact. So we look for organizations which are ready to leverage or give us a little bit of a long rope when it comes to, I know this person maybe on paper is not the best fit, but we would still want to go ahead with this person and give him a chance to fail. And that's like something which I said before was, let him fail before you know uh, rejecting the candidate. And I've been very grateful for Pernod Ricard for giving us this opportunity to experiment with the talent base. Because when it comes for all the people who we have presently been working with, truth be told, an exact fitment in terms of a resume match to the expectation has just been just about a 10 to 20% for those candidates make that cut. The rest are the rest have learned while working with the campaign, and now it swells my heart with pride to say that they match up with the very best when it comes to productivity. And I think where they may have a little, be a little lesser when it comes to their education qualification or other factors, they match that up multiple times with the intent to prove themselves. And that is something which is very unique to the people who we work for. Continuing on the next set of questions, as a leader in the field, what advice would you give to organizations, uh, talents who may be looking to set up their work in the space of diversity and inclusion? I've understood the response when it comes to companies and corporates and how can they up their game. But for new diversity and inclusion leaders who are, you know, given the responsibility, and I see this as a tough challenge for many, and that is to convince their particular organizations to make DNI as a uh, as something which is important and relevant and something which has to be implemented. You have done it in the past, and I would want your advice for CSR leaders or DNI leaders who may be hearing this podcast.
Two very important steps that I tell everyone is that don't start taking baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
If you are taking baby steps, you should not be in the IDE space. IDE is real,
Mm-hmm.
it is bold, it requires you to upset a system. It's clearly meant to upset a system to bring in positive changes, to be inclusive. You can't say, I'm going to take baby steps in this step and walk like 2 steps, congratulate myself, walk back 3 steps, go back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think IDE leaders, whether it's a small company, mid-sized company, or a large company, if you are identifying an IDE leader, make sure that the leader is equipped with position, with
Mm-hmm.
privilege, and with power to be able to take decisions. Decisions for policy, decisions for talent hiring, and not, decisions to create a roadmap of inclusion. Often we see that within 2 years time, people hire ID leaders, they make them do like 1 million set of activities, participate in hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
benchmarking studies, win awards, and then there is nothing more to do.
Mm-hmm.
IDE is a journey.
Hmm.
It's not a 2 year, it's not a 3 year thing. It is as long as the organization is alive, thriving, and growing. So if they are not there in terms of inclusion, to make them inclusive. If they are already on the journey, to help them accelerate their journey. If they are already
Hmm.
accelerated and working well, to ensure that they follow on path.
Hmm.
So, ID leaders, new generation, please learn from your peers. Please learn
Hmm.
from your contemporaries. But
Hmm.
also, I would say, challenge the status quo.
Hmm.
Agree on numbers, agree on KPIs, hold business leaders responsible. Don't keep
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
harder paths for years to come. Start with
Hmm.
measurable steps. I don't want to
Hmm.
call them baby step, but even if they are incremental in number, start with them. And to get people
Hmm.
talking, get your highest leadership involved in it. And this is the only piece of advice that I have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this, ma'am, and thank you for being so upfront on the on or the biggest reluctance is that can we trouble or can we upturn the apple cart, and many are hesitant to take that step given that let status quo remain. And as you rightly said, that's what needs to be challenged if there has to be a significant contribution to this space. Ma'am, when it comes to internal stakeholders, many corporates have taken up initiatives for building diversity and inclusion, but then there is a lot more responsibility that it owes to its external stakeholders, may that be their employers or may that be their customers or their external stakeholders, may that be the agencies which they work with, may that be the vendors. What steps can businesses take to, you know, work towards ensuring greater participation and greater DNI initiatives be something which is center stage, not just within the organization but also amongst the external stakeholders. How can corporates work towards that?
See, I think the most important part to do is to really
Hmm.
make sure that your senior most leaders have bought it to the process. Sometimes with blessings of the CHRO, with and that's why it is very important that you have a leadership sponsor within the organization, not only a budget availability but a sponsor from the business to be able to drive these initiatives. It's when you work with
Hmm.
them as a team to create
Hmm.
goals for the board, to create goals for directors, to percolate that goals down the system. So it can be an executive analyst kind of a person to a director and MD. Each one of them, I believe, can have diversity and inclusion goals. Once you reach to
Hmm.
that level, getting the person to then start talking about we need
Right.
buy-in from senior management. It's very
Right.
important to have leadership sponsor. The leadership
Hmm.
sponsor is the one who brings in authenticity. It brings in
Hmm.
sponsorship of the activity. And once you
Hmm.
have that backing, in
Hmm.
addition to the CHRO, whoever that person may be,
Hmm.
it brings in
Hmm.
more validity to what you are doing. It
Right.
brings in that
Right.
push that they can give to business leaders to invest in the business. And when his or her or their goals become part of the goals of the board, become part of the senior management, right up
Hmm.
till the entry level, everyone then believes in having an IDE goal as part of their performance framework.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Um, with that, ma'am, any parting thoughts and your views to make diversity and inclusion something which resonates across? We spoke about the corporate world. I think it has to be done in a greater way also outside. And your thoughts on how can India be made more inclusive, and how can we create a better future for all? Just your parting thoughts to that, ma'am. And I think it has to do a lot with uh, creation of uh, equality and sensitivity to all. But I would want you to respond if possible to it.
So I think very importantly is the investment on learning inclusive language.
mm,
about
mm,
giving up certain biases and uh, you know practices which we may be subconsciously doing, like for
mm,
example misgendering a person, passing
mm,
misogynist comments,
mm,
passing communal comments, passing
mm,
ability related comments, having a very insular view about what you think should your world should be. I
mm,
think in any organization or any space, whether it's a private company, whether it's a society, whether it's a larger corporation area, a city, a state, a town, a country, the most important founding message is that of universal brotherhood. So
right.
I believe that as a country, we are not strangers to the concept. We
Mm,
keep talking
mm,
about it in so many forums, Vasudev Kutumbakam. But in
mm,
reality, one needs to retrospect and see who are the people left behind. Are these
mm,
people left behind because of their food habits, because of
mm,
cultural differences, because of
mm,
skin color, because of language,
mm,
because of identity? And can we
mm,
say we'll become truly great by letting India leave behind some of her most deprived children? If the answer to
mm,
that is no, then that is a great sign for us to invest and
mm.
constantly upskill ourselves to be better versions of ourselves and to become ultimately better Indians and better global citizens.
Absolutely, and absolutely, and it's about adopting the values of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and also while we speak, making it more intrinsic. I think that's where the future should lie. On that, ma'am, thank you so very much for being part of the podcast today and for sparing your valuable time. And look forward to the opportunity to interact with you again whenever convenient. And thanks again for being my guest.
Thank you so much. Have a nice evening. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye, ma'am.